On today's World Insight with Chin Wei, Asian leaders gathered in Tajikistan for the CICA Security Conference. What's on the security agenda? And a Chinese vice premier to co-host the 10th China-UK Economic and Financial Dialogue. How are ties with Britain amid a change in Prime Minister?
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you on CGTN. Chinese President Xi Jinping has wrapped up his visit to Central Asia over the weekend. He first went to Tajikistan for his year's Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, where he called on the SCO to set an example of a community with a shared future. Then he traveled to Tajikistan for the Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia, or CICA. What are the new challenges and opportunities for security cooperation in Asia? Before our discussion, take a look at this first.
Chinese President Xi Jinping wrapped up his 5-day Central Asia tour on Sunday, which included 2 state visits and 2 summits, along with several bilateral and trilateral meetings. President Xi said Asia was one of the most dynamic and promising regions in the world. Despite some common challenges such as scarce political trust and economic tensions, Asian countries should work together to make the continent a safer and better place to live.
We should abandon zero-sum games and protectionism, strengthen communication in policies, enhance political mutual trust, and gradually expand political consensus.
Both summits did serve as platforms for multilateral dialogue and consultations. The SCO and CICA could be effective in building cooperation in security, stability, and sustainable development among Eurasian and Asia-Pacific countries in today's turbulent world.
China always maintains good relations with Asian countries and has participated in the establishment of multilateral mechanisms such as CICA, SCO, and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. It has also made contributions to Asian stability and prosperity.
Looking ahead, Xi said China was willing to go full steam with its massive international project, the Belt and Road Initiative, to create more viable opportunities for itself and other partners. The Chinese leader said China had always been a strong supporter of peace and stability in Asia and around the world, and China was willing to share its experiences with Asian neighbors to step up regional security, to spur economic growth, and to build a community of common destiny for mankind.
For more on SCO and CICA, all of these abbreviations, of course, we're going to explain that. Joining us in Istanbul, Serkan Oral, who is a political analyst and a writer and Central Asian geopolitical commentator. In New Delhi, we have Deepankar Banerjee, former director and head of the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies. And in our Beijing studio, Ruo Yongquan, associate research fellow from the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations. Gentlemen, welcome to our program. Mr. Aro, help us to understand why would all of these leaders so eager to attend some of the conferences and summits, as we mentioned earlier? Why do they really matter?
This will be an historical chance for the leaders who are attending the CICA meeting summit. There will be a chance for putting global economical system and also the currency system and also chance for the peace for the region. Especially we are observing the restriction of the New World Order and also international economical system. So US is focused on its own issues and putting pressure on the other countries who are not on the same line with US administration. But the principles and the mechanism of the international system is belonging to the decades before. So there should be a change, and the leaders has a chance now to make an special standing against the rogue tweets of Trump administration.
What you have just said, Mr. Olo, seems to be reminding some people of a possibility. Is China trying to build its own so-called territory of power, excluding the United States? Mrs. Banerjee, what is your take?
Yes, we are living in extraordinary times. As my predecessor just mentioned, there is a change, the emergent change in the world order. Power balance is moving from this side to that side. There's shift in adjustment of roles of major powers, and hence I think these two conferences, first the CICA, and now immediately after that is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's conference, summit meetings, both become extraordinarily important. Now we are seeing currently instability in the Middle East as well as in the Persian Gulf. The current developments that is happening around the place are cause of considerable concern. And I think at this important moment for heads of governments and senior people on strategic and other issues to meet now to discuss these questions become very important.
I see. But Mr. Luo, hasn't the current administration in the U.S. Been talking about the so-called Indo-Pacific? That seems to be an order of the world in their eyes, even though the interpretation of that is still up to different people. What is China and the other countries for SCO, CICA trying to figure out the so-called the order of the region or the order of the world?
In my opinion, the SCO and the CICA are very important for China because we are focusing on how to rebuild the regional architecture. And not just now we mentioned the Indo-Pacific strategy or the anti-globalization treaty or so on and so forth. So for us, we are very important to support, to promote the multilateral cooperation. So I think SCO and CICA give us a platform to discuss the regional and international issues that we are concerned, and we will find the solutions for the international and the regional issues. That's very important for us to strengthen the mutual understanding, the mutual confidence.
But exactly what kind of solutions are we talking about? Are these just talk shops, as many people, if you read the international press coverage of these conferences before, some were describing it as talk shops. Others say, wow, there is a lot of political ambition inside it. So exactly what is it, and what are the solutions? Do we see any specific ones? Mr. Banerjee.
Yes. Now, the CICA idea really originated from Kazakhstan. It was the late President Nursultan Nazarbayev who put this idea forward in 1992. And the situation then was the emerging developments in the Central Asian republics, their relationship with Asia as well as with Europe, and that's where the idea originated. And it has become even more important today with the current developments, as you mentioned, in the Indo-Pacific region, as well as, I think, more important, at the Eurasian region, the difficulties and the uncertainties that are taking place at this moment. It becomes very important that the organization like the CICA, which is essentially a confidence-building arrangement to anticipate and counter the possibilities of conflict in the region. This becomes very important. And the role of major powers in Asia, like China, Russia, India, and others, become very relevant.
Right. You know, we could have this mechanism, this summit, that conference. The question really is, have these mechanisms, have these summits really solve some of the problems that we're facing right now? Mr. Oro, if you could input your insights here, what have they solved so far? What are the aspirations this time to solve any specific questions? Are we going to see the delivery of the solutions in recent days, months, if not years? Mr. Olo.
The American interests are different than the CICA countries' interests. That is the main difference. The economical trade or trade war or new Cold War are the sentences formed by the US policies. China, Russia, India, and even Turkey as a NATO member are coming together against these threats and policies. So if you see the structure of CICA, then we can find a chance to see that the NATO, EU, World Bank or United Nations are the old-fashioned organizations and not giving the same answers to the needs. So there is a good chance just shaping and showing that the multi-power world is now standing on. If the other one, I mean the other old power as US wants to be part of this, the new world shaped in a justice and peaceful way, then welcome. But
well,
it seems it's not easy.
But Mr. Luo, in Beijing, you have to deliver, to earn credibility. So have all these mechanisms been delivering results? And when we talk about the Eurasian region, as Mr. Banerjee mentioned earlier, this is a very vibrant region. You got a Eurasian economic community, which is proposed by Russia, going on right now. You also have the Belt and Road Initiative, China and others trying to build. But the thing is, what can this mechanism and others deliver? And how much have been really delivered besides discussions?
I think the most important thing is we sit down to talk with each other to identify which concern, which field we need to more cooperate.
To China, what are the fields?
I think that for China, the most important thing is we need to build the community with a shared future. In other words, we will find that we will resolve our disputes by negotiations, in which means that we discuss our alignment of the Belt and Road and the development strategy of from Central Asia countries, and also Southeast Asian countries.
No, Mr. Luo, that sounds very abstract. If you can be a little bit specific, for those who do not know every story going on among the countries in the region, which is very difficult for people from outside the region to understand, what exactly are some of the difficulties aligning up some of the best interests of all countries and be able to come to consensus? Give us one or two examples if you can, Mr. Luo.
For example, we can see the terrorism, not only the SCO, but also the CICA. I think we can find the solutions to fighting against the terrorism, because the terrorism is the common concern in the region. What
kind of terrorism are you talking about, and who are the players to fight the terrorism? It's too general in your answer. Can you be more specific, Mr. Luo, once again?
Because under the framework of CO, we have established the regional framework to discuss the terrorism issue first. The second, then we have the annual exercises or the training to fight against terrorism. And also with the CICA member states, not only multilaterally, but bilaterally speaking, we have the bilateral cooperation. For example, China and some Thailand and then Cambodia, we have the bilateral cooperation against the terrorism. So in my opinion, for the SCO and the CICA, the important thing is we find a platform to discuss bilaterally or multilaterally to discuss and to identify the terrorism or the other issues like the poverty, the starvation, the non-traditional issues that we must focus on. That's the focus. That is we must push forward.
Discuss, and discuss. That's the only verb I heard from Mr. Luo. So, Mr. Banerjee, some people ask about the question, what about delivery?
Absolutely. Well, that is a fundamental question. But however, one must accept that given the changing circumstances and the emerging developments in the world, possibilities of the shift in global order, lack of cooperation, there will be multiple organizations trying to address these issues. Now, there will be a certain amount of overlap between the CICA and the SCO. We must accept it. These are initial stages. Not very much has happened for stability and cooperation within either the CICA or constructive engagements under the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I see over a period of time that there will be a rationalization of responsibilities and activities. But as of now, I see the CICA addressing fundamentally questions of confidence building between nations, especially in a disturbed area, particularly in the Eurasian region. And the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, looking after the broader. Now, Shanghai Cooperation Organization is the largest regional organization in the world. It includes the maximum number of population, well over half the world, with major countries involved. If they can cooperate and lay down norms, regulations, methods of interaction, and avoid conflicts such as trade wars, sanctions, unnecessary interventions, and of course, as was mentioned by my friend from Turkey, the overwhelming question facing the region in the Eurasia, Asia Pacific and elsewhere is the question of terrorism. Unless we can address effectively the question of terrorism in the world, we will not have succeeded.
Mr. O'Hala, I guess the same question to you. A big ambitions of these organizations, but delivery very important, because right now the world is changing very fast. If organization does not function to the extent of delivery, they will become immediately irrelevant, even if there is big political determination to work together. So, Mr. O'Hala, what do you think is the starting point? Are we seeing any potential for a starting point to resolve some of the biggest issues that you all lined up?
CICA especially needs to establish the military political agenda. The terrorist organizations are getting bigger with the two routes. First, the poor income, and the second, the international support. Think that the Daesh, ISIS in Iraq or Syria, are they taking to Asia? Then what will happen in Asia? The terrorist organizations are they supporting by the Western countries who are against the growing of the economies of the Asia countries? Let's see the important point from this side. So your terrorist or my terrorist is good. There is no question like that. First, CICA should stand against these terrorism issues and find a path to act against this. And the military political agenda, and create a cultural similar area, and use an effective mechanism of dialogue. That is important. The Belt and Road initiative is the main economical growth movement for the Asia countries, even from Beijing to Istanbul, Istanbul to London. So the New World Order will be shaped, maybe not so quickly in the 21st century, but the roots will be powerful and live long.
What you have just said, a very extremely important point. Mr. Luo, that is, we all aware now we're in a new version of globalization. It's not the traditional global supply chain anymore, but rather where do we go from here with new player becoming more significant on the international stage? But the question really is, even if with mechanism like this, do people really just brainstorm? Or they are brainstorming and they're also acting according to the thoughts they are brainstorming about? That is the issue here. I mean, on the one hand, we could complain, you know, why the rest of the world is not accepting the emerging economies, developing countries, even though they're becoming so big in global GDP and pushing for the economic leap forward of the world. But on the other hand, we are still doing things as normal. So that is the thing that we're facing right now. So will SCO, will CICA, those are very important occasions to test the credibilities of these organizations. Mr. Luo.
One thing that that many countries accept, that is, I give you an example, that is the new concept of Asian security that China proposed many years ago.
What does that mean? Is it an abstract concept? What does it mean to the others?
Yeah, I give you an example. It means that we must propose the common, sustainable, and comprehensive security view. So that is adopted by China and ASEAN countries. For example, China and ASEAN countries now we discuss and propose the COC, Code of Conduct in South China Sea.
Right.
That is that shows that China and ASEAN countries we discuss and push forward the common, sustainable, and the comprehensive security concept. That is very important. So I think against this background, if we sit down and discuss, that's most important than we fight against each other.
Let's have a wrap up
Yes.
right now. Mr. O'Hara, we're running out of time. Would you like to also say a few words before we wrap up this round of discussion?
That can show that this is the multi-power world now. And also, I can say that for the Asia, in the future, when Dushanbe becomes a Zurich city, peace will be stabilized, I think. So both economical values, the economical growth policies, dialogue, and political, military constitutions should show the real 21st century as a hope to the whole world.
I see. Sarkan Oral, also Deepak Banerjee, Luo Yongkun. Thank you so much, gentlemen, helping us to understand what's behind all of these abbreviations, SCO and CICA, whether they are mechanisms really likely to deliver on some of the critical issues for the region. Really appreciate, gentlemen, for being with us. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program, China's Vice Premier will host the 10th China-UK Economic and Financial Dialogue. How will bilateral ties persevere as the UK selects its new Prime Minister? Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you Monday to Friday on CGTN. While British Prime Minister Theresa May announced her resignation, candidates are campaigning hard in the Conservative Party leader election. But will May's departure affect China-UK ties? This week, Chinese Vice Premier Hu Chunhua co-hosts the 10th China-UK Economic and Financial Dialogue with British Chancellor of the Exchequer Philip Hammond. The two sides are eyeing cooperation on trade, investment, and other issues such as 5G services. For more on China-UK ties, joining us in Durham, Tom Brooks, Dean and Professor of Law and Government at Durham University. In Beijing, Cui Hongjian, Director of the Department of European Studies at the China Institute of International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to our program. Of course, every occasion when the two sides, leaders get together, should be one celebrated because there are a lot of interactions, Professor Brooks, going on right now between the two sides. 65th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations, that certainly is something to celebrate about. But what is the new momentum? What do you see as the new one, Mr. Brooks?
Well, there's an awful lot to celebrate between the ties between the two countries, and it's a very strong and healthy relationship. In terms of the new momentum, I think there's an awful lot on China's side that's brought, but I think that in Britain there is this real paralysis in Parliament over Brexit and Britain's relationship with the European Union that is not going. It wasn't going away under Theresa May. Theresa May was not successful in seeing Brexit through, but now the new leader, whoever it will be. All of them have vowed to see a Brexit through, and that's really, I think, unfortunately, seemingly their only focus. They haven't really said anything about Britain's role in the world, international policy, international development, or even domestic affairs. Yeah. It's been entirely concentrated on Brexit. Though there should be some very big things in future to come, but Brexit needs to happen first in their eyes.
Professor Brooks was very diplomatic in suggesting no matter who is visiting the UK or what you want to talk about what we are thinking about right now among the politicians are the Brexit, or on our way to Brexit. So, Mr. Cui, does it make sense?
That's right.
Unfortunately.
Sure, I agree with Brooks' views. I think now, besides this, long tradition of the cooperation between two countries, I think one of the very valuable things for these two countries is steel. I think it's different from some other European countries. And China and the UK, we do have a very big complementary, cooperation areas or space.
Please.
For example, how about the financial service sector? So I think this, especially now, this time, it will give a very, very big, momentum for both two countries. And then, of course, the scenario of Brexit will be another momentum, no matter it's positive or negative. But indeed, I think especially British side try to take any chance of the cooperation with China, and in the scenario of the Brexit.
You see, that is the issue of priority, isn't it? Professor Brooks, if you look at the UK, the biggest priority, the immediate task is about the Brexit or not, how to do it or not do it. And then, Mr. Cui, for China, the immediate priority is how to survive and thrive out of the current geopolitical situation, including cooperating with the UK. But certainly one is about looking out, the other is about looking inward. Very different priority. How would you be able to line up these different priorities and make the two sides have any consensus? Professor Brooks, I do need to invite your wisdom here.
Well, thank you. I think that's right. I think China is very much looking outward and looking to engage and in a very positive and exciting way. And I think that there's been some reception to this. The current government was reported to be open to considering Huawei coming in to help build some parts of the 5G network that the government has been trying to get moving on for some time. So and that's one of many other examples. But the problem is very much domestic politically for the British government in terms of Brexit, the mandate that they think they had to deliver on that, and the problems that's causing. That said, that's the concern of the government. I mean, when it comes to businesses, I think that the need to look for new markets, new partners, or to engage with existing partners in a stronger way, I think is something that's never been kind of more important. And I give one very quick example. I'm Dean of Durham Law School, and one of the things that we did earlier this year is we launched the largest Center for Chinese Law in Europe here in Durham, because we recognize that in terms of the global legal sector, China is has a very important part to play. It's very important for legal education and shared knowledge between our countries of the UK and China, and we saw a real need to move this forward and take a lead on it. I think there'll be others following suit, but maybe not looking to the government for inspiration.
Mr. Brooks, Durham University do that. It's certainly very inspiring. However, one has to point out that there were occasions in which the previous administrations, I wouldn't exactly mention which, had agreed with China on the whole package of cooperation possibilities, and both sides have been trying to deliver. However, with the change of administration, everything changed, or at least everything changed to a certain extent. So there was quite a struggling from the Chinese side to try to find who to work with, about what, and to what degree. Now, we are facing a very similar, probably even more situation right now. You do not even have a prime minister now, and every of these candidates, strong ones, have their own political agenda, I have to say. So, Mr. Brooks, despite of the law center you have established over there, how much do you think, whether it's about 5G or other financial cooperations, will eventually be delivered? Of course, we all want to deliver, but how much? What's your pragmatic analysis? Before I go to Mr. Cui, Professor Brooks first.
Yes. Well, I think when it comes to the legal sector, which I know an awful lot about, and the financial sector in the city, I think it's already I'm engaging with China and not waiting for a prime minister to tell it to do one thing or another. I think that what I've started here in my school is something that other law schools will be doing, and it's something that's been featured a lot in the news in the UK. In terms of, you're absolutely right on so many points that you raise with me in this interview and others. But I agree with you that there's been many promises on the British side, an issue about following through. It has not helped that there will be a new Prime Minister. We've got no idea really who it will be. We have a front runner in Boris Johnson, former Foreign Secretary, who did not achieve much at all as Foreign Secretary and was not in the role very long, is not very experienced on worldly affairs. You have Jeremy Hunt, the current Foreign Secretary. He came second. He's got almost as much experience in the role as Boris Johnson did, a bit more capable than Boris. I think would probably be a better partner for China than Boris Johnson might. But it's all very speculative. None have given a manifesto for what that vision will be about engaging beyond and how they will make good on the promises that have been made by the current government and past governments to China and to other very close special friends of Britain, and that is a problem. I agree with you.
Mr. Cui, I mean, no offense here. If China has a difficulty approaching the current leadership inside the UK, nobody knows who exactly it is. So other countries would have the same problem. Okay, everybody has an equal challenge. However, for China, this is a critical time. It's a time to illustrate exactly where China should go, could go for partnerships with important countries around the world. UK certainly is a big part of it. So, Mr. Cui, to what extent do you think China is patient enough to be neutral during the process in which the UK is trying to select its future prime minister, which is very crucial? Secondly, to what degree do you think China is matured enough and sophisticated enough to understand and grasp the ways to communicate, to lay a foundation? Mr. Cui.
I think firstly,
I was asking you this question as if you were on that specific delegation. Of course you're not, but I'm sure you have your thoughts here. Mr. Cui.
Certainly, I think now I agree with you that it's a very crucial time for China to look for any opportunity to get a closer cooperation with the UK, because even now we have the so-called golden era, definition for these bilateral relations. But of course, I think China also has to suffer some uncertainties from this change of administration and also uncertainty of Brexit. But of course, I think maybe a good news for China and the UK is no matter which leader will decide this Brexit scenario or process, or which kind of Brexit it would be, soft one or hard one. Undoubtedly, China would be very, very important partner after the Brexit. Because once there will be a so-called hard Brexit, certainly there will be a very big requirement from UK side on China to get some more trade, investment, and even some other cooperation. Just like this time, this dialogue between China and the UK on the finance and also finance and economy, we can find out a lot of achievement on the agenda, including this connect between the stock market in Shanghai and London, and also some other, because I think China is a so big market in the eyes of the British business people and also financial sector. So a lot of attraction.
Both sides are looking at each other as extremely important alternative and partners, particularly with the dramatic change both sides are experiencing in different ways. However, there's one thing, Professor Brooks, that is the UK as part of the so-called the West, so-called, and also as a so-called a member of the Five Eyes, which is a security alliance between the United States and several other of its allies in the West to work on security on the internet and in the cyberspace. So, Mr. Brooks, how much will the U.S. apparent concerns and politics toward China filter into British understanding of the situation. Will the UK be able to come with its own real analysis of the situation and do things according to its own analysis, not just by hearsay? Mr. Brooks.
Well, I do hope that the British government does, follows its own analysis and is not, taking orders from Donald Trump's White House or the United States more generally. I mean, I think the current issues around the United States and other countries in the world are really a product of one particular individual in the White House and not necessarily representative at all of the American public. I know this is someone who originally is from the United States or even many of its politicians. And I think that a lot of the problems that we see in terms of relations between the U.S. and elsewhere may well go away as soon as there is someone else that is president. In the meantime, I'm very hopeful that the British government will follow its own analysis at a time when Britain needs to look elsewhere for somewhere beyond Europe to build new markets with and develop itself. It has done something that has upset the Americans and elsewhere, and I think that was a bold move and a brave move. And so far, after Donald Trump's visit to see Theresa May, the Prime Minister, and meeting Her Majesty the Queen, Theresa May has not changed her mind on this. And in fact, I mean, the leadership candidates can be criticized for not saying much beyond Brexit, and they are not saying much about beyond Brexit. But none of them have also said, to my knowledge, anything about changing that deal. And I think Britain really does need to look east, needs to look to China, have closer ties to China in the future if Brexit is to be a success.
Yeah. Mr. Cui, this is a very crucial question. I'm sure both of you, Professor Brooks and Mr. Cui, heard the interesting quote coming from the Russian President Vladimir Putin during the Economic Forum in St. Petersburg. He was talking about, when the two tigers are fighting, the monkey in the mountain better watch and wait for the result. Of course, he said after that as Russia it sees China as a partner and therefore not just there to watch, but rather want to align some of the interests and be able to make the best out of it. So, Mr. Cui, I'm not using this analogy for the UK because Russia and the UK are totally different things. But how would countries be able to come up with its own way of analysis when looking at the real change going on? Well, at the same time, Mr. Cui, China does not want force anybody to be in a corner and say choose Team A or Team B. So what kind of chemistry can be really created at this moment between the UK and China, Mr. Cui, realistically speaking?
I think for most of European countries, including UK, they do have a different feeling with Mr. Putin on so-called potential, gaming between China and the US. I think maybe the possible feeling from UK on this issue is once there are two elephants dancing on the grassland, how about the feeling of the grassland itself? So I think it's right to the case of the 5G or Huawei issue in UK. We can find that now Britain not yet to give up any commitment to any pressure from Washington, and then now London still try to insist it's a kind of maybe independent or smart way to deal with this issue. But of course, I hope that because it's a very important tradition for British foreign policy to keep a balance between any gaming between the big powers or some other in the history. So I believe that this time Britain would also try to look for maybe a third way to deal with this difficult issue.
Well, we're trying to see what the third way is, if there is any. Thank you so much for now. Cui Hongjian, Tom Brooks, learned a lot. Thank you so much for both of you. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for more insights across China and around the world. Good night.